Hi. Well, I'm really excited to be able to present to you today a couple examples of how we're using technology to bridge the gap between hospital care and longer-term recovery at McLean. First, I thought I would start with a bit of a confession, though, because I feel a little strange about presenting at a technology summit, because I know very little about technology. Just to illustrate that, this is my planner, and it's still paper and pen, and I have a very, very, very old smartphone, and I've never tweeted in my life. I mention this because I think, if someone like me can see the potential of technology in psychiatry, it must be very great. And also to put into context what I'll be showing you today, I'm going to be presenting very simple applications of technology. They're all going to be things that are very feasible, simple, but that I think are going to have a huge immediate impact for our patients. So I work at the Behavioral Health Partial Hospital Program at McLean, and for those of you who aren't familiar with partial hospitals, you can think of us as being a bridge between inpatient and outpatient treatment. So our patients come to us, they receive intensive treatment during the day, and then they go home at night. And they're typically with us anywhere from between 3 to 10 days, so a pretty short-term program with the goal of stabilizing people during times of crisis and really acute symptoms, but getting them back out to outpatient treatment as quickly as possible. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of challenges to this type of setting, and I think there are some specific ones where technological solutions can really solve the problem. So the first example I'll talk about is the transition from our program to outpatient treatment. So when people are with us, they're in a very structured, supportive environment. They're in group therapy almost all day long, so they're having a lot of social interaction. And then they discharge, and there's this very abrupt shift back to their daily life, which is often unstructured, maybe unsupportive. They're going back to different stressors. They may be starting with a new outpatient provider, and they might not have an appointment for a while. So we know that this transition time is high risk for relapse, rehospitalization, and suicide. So we thought that technology could help us actually solve this problem pretty easily with a simple smartphone app that would help bridge this transition for people. So we recently completed our first ever smartphone study at our program, the BHP, and for this we had a little over 100 of our patients complete a very simple app during the 2 weeks after they discharged from our program. So the app had them complete some self-report measures of their symptoms that were identical to the ones that they completed while they were in our program. Then it also prompted them several times a day to report on how they were feeling in that moment, and if they had used any of the skills, the therapy skills that they had learned in our program since the last prompt. And so similar to the first talk, we were really interested in feasibility and acceptability at this stage. So do our patients even want this? And the response was overwhelmingly yes. This was our most successful study we've ever done. 87% of people who were invited to participate enrolled, and their feedback was just very positive. So at the end of the 2 weeks, people said things like, keep it going for longer. I liked that it made me feel like I was still in treatment, and it helped me understand where my moods were on a day-to-day basis. So in addition to that great feedback, this first study allowed us to answer some questions that we had had for a while about what do our patients actually do when they leave our program. I think like many programs, we end up throwing the kitchen sink at our patients in terms of therapy. So they learn a lot of different cognitive behavioral therapy skills, dialectical behavioral therapy skills, some acceptance and commitment things, but we have no idea what actually sticks and what they actually use once they leave. So with this first smartphone study, we were able to answer that question because they answered these prompts about what they were doing. And what we found was that behavioral activation was the winner. That was the most frequently reported used skill after discharge, followed by mindfulness, valued living, cognitive restructuring, and so on. So we spend a lot of time in our program on behavioral activation, so this was not so unexpected. But we also spend a lot of time on cognitive restructuring and less on mindfulness and valued living. So it was interesting to see that was kind of down the line. So we were also able to look at, are there particular skills that are more associated with maintaining your symptom improvement after discharge? So that first bar there is showing you just total number of skills that people reported using in this 2-week period. And you can see there's a pretty strong association with their depression, maintaining their depression improvement. And then when you look at the specific skills, again, it's behavioral activation and cognitive restructuring that seem to be most associated with maintaining your improvement. So the takeaway from our first smartphone study was that our patients want this. They found it helpful. We can learn a lot about the treatment we're providing. So we're excited about doing the next step of this, of really taking this very simple app, making it even better, and offering it to more of our patients. All right, the second problem I think technology can help us solve is related to the brevity of our treatment. So as I mentioned, our patients are only with us from like 3 to 10 days. That's a really short amount of time to get to know someone, figure out what they most need, and it's a really short amount of time to teach people and have them master complicated and difficult things like cognitive therapy. Cognitive therapy is really hard to do, especially when you're in an acute crisis or under a lot of stress. And as you saw from our first study, even though we spend a lot of time on it, it wasn't one of the top skills that people ended up using, even though when they did use it, it was associated with maintaining their improvement. So I developed a very simple computer task that I think can help speed up some of this cognitive therapy. So in this task, the computer presents you with an ambiguous situation like people laugh after something you said. And then a word flashes very quickly, like the word embarrassing. And your job is to decide, is the word related to that ambiguous situation? So if I said yes to this one, I think embarrassing is related, I would be incorrect, because that's a negative interpretation of that situation. Later on in the session, you might see that same situation, but this time paired with a word like funny. So this time, if I say, yes, I think funny is related to that, I'll be correct, because that's a more neutral or benign interpretation of that ambiguous situation. And the computer gives you hundreds of these trials in a very short amount of time, so 10 minutes. And that experience helps people quickly realize just how much their brain is automatically jumping to a negative conclusion and not even considering more positive ones. So it can really help increase their awareness of their negative thought patterns, I think much more efficiently than we can in regular face-to-face cognitive therapy. And then it can help them start reappraising those situations, especially if it's delivered in conjunction with our face-to-face cognitive therapy, like in our program. So I gave this task to a little over 100 of our patients again. While they were in our program, they did this very easy 10-minute task each day. And people said things like, it seems simple, but it made an impact on my perspective. And it really helped solidify the program. And our initial results suggest that it might actually enhance outcomes as well. So in this graph, people who did the task are in the red, and people who did a control task are in the yellow. And you can see for our younger patients, and in this case, younger means 37 or below, if you did this simple task, you had significantly more improvement in your well-being compared to if you did a control task. Not true for our older patients, and I'd be happy to talk about that more if people have ideas. But this is remarkable given how powerful our intensive treatment already is, that this little add-on might actually improve outcomes for some subgroups of our patients. So I'm really excited about next steps for this. Would obviously be offering it on people's smartphones. In that study, it was on a laptop. So that really limited the number of patients who could do it in our program, and they couldn't take it with them. So this would solve some of those problems as well. And so with that, I would like to thank our whole team who makes this work possible. And of course, our patients and staff, our advisory board, and Justin and the ITP for all of their help with us low-tech people getting this done. So thank you.